Hello and welcome, I'm your Code Monkey. In this lecture we're going to add all kinds of small things to polish up our game. If you're a regular on this channel, then you've certainly heard me say that polish is what separates good games from great games. So as you build your own games, make sure you don't neglect polish. Here let's add a bunch of small, tiny things that will make a big difference in the final game. Let's begin with a very simple, very visual one. Let's just add some walls to our map. And first let's just hide our canvas so that it's not blocking our view. So again, over here we can use the buttons on the hierarchy to hide it. Okay, great. So let's add some walls, and for that let's create a brand new 3D cube. Let's name this a wall. Let's put it quite a bit thin, so over here on the scale, for the X let's put it 0.25, then on the Y let's put 3. So something like this. Then we modify the Z, so let's put it over here on the side, right next to the counters. Okay, so that's the wall. Let's just stretch it out one direction and the other one. Okay, so that's our basic wall. Now in the included project files, there's a nice wall material. So let's go over here into assets, under materials, and yep, here it is, the wall material. So let's just drag it and use this one. And yep, there you go, it's just a nice simple gradient. This is also an example of how you can take something simple and make it a bit more interesting. If you look at this material, the base texture is really just this. It is literally just a simple vertical gradient texture. And then with a color applied to it, and it looks pretty good. Okay, so this wall, let's put the wall on all three sides. So let's duplicate this. So just select and press Ctrl D, duplicate. Let's put one on the other side. So right there, right next to the counters, okay. And finally the one there, so Ctrl D to duplicate it. Let's push it over there on the side and rotate it 90 degrees. And let's put it just like that. Let's just scale it to get to that end and to get to that end. Okay, so we have our nice walls. But over here, if we're playing the game, we can still see the floor on the outside. That looks a bit ugly, so let's fix that. Let's create another object, and let's create a 3D object, another cube. And for this cube, let's put it over here on the side, and this one, let's use the black material. So again, in the included assets, there's this nice black material. There you go, it's completely black, nothing to it. So let's just use this as kind of a hider. So let's just scale it quite a bit, and lift it up. Okay, so there it is, a black material right next to the wall. And let's put another one over here on the left side. And just like that. Can also put another one on the back there, even though I don't think the camera can see that part, but still, let's put it. So just put it like that and stretch it out. Okay, that's good. By the way, over here on the outside, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to perfectly match. The camera is never going to see that position, so it doesn't matter. It only matters what the camera can see. And if we play like this, and if there you go, now that looks quite nice. If we want over there, we can get it together just a little bit. And we can also move the camera forward a tiny bit. So over here on this one, let's push it just a little bit to the left. Okay, and now on the virtual camera, let's play the game. And now here, if we want, we can push it up a little bit, something like this. So let's put it on this Z, so let's copy it, stop playing the game, and let's paste it just like that. Okay, so here's our game, and as you can see, with just this one tiny change, just adding some walls and a nice black outside, just with that, it already looks so much better than having some counters in wide open space. Now for another simple one, let's add some nice particles while the player is moving. So in the included assets, if we go inside the prefab visuals, over here is a nice one for player moving particles. This one, as you can see, is a particle system, so let's drag it over here into the world to see what it looks like. And as you can see, by default, it's actually not spawning anything, so I can make sure that this one is running and nope, nothing is spawning. So this is actually set up in a really interesting way, is that instead of spawning particles all the time, it only emits while moving. So if I click to move this object, there you go, the particles start emitting, and if I stop, they stop. So this one is definitely perfect for a player particle system. The way this is set up is over here on the emission. On rate over time, it is set to 0, so it doesn't spawn anything automatically, and it only has over here the rate over distance. So as it moves, it's going to spawn that number of particles. Then the other settings, they're all pretty basic. So there's some gravity, so they fall down, just like the stove counter particles. The simulation is over here on space, so that as I move, the particles stay behind. This is important. If I were to put that in local and I move it around, look at that, this is not what we want. We want the particles to essentially stay behind instead of following this transform. So that is why this change is super important. If that one is set to whirl and as I move, yep, the particles stay behind. Okay, great. And the other properties are all pretty basic. For the shape, it's a cone pointing upwards. Then for the size over lifetime, again, just a basic curve, constantly becoming smaller and smaller. And down here on the renderer, instead of rendering a quad, it's actually rendering a mesh, and it's rendering a sphere mesh. So that is just so that it looks a little bit better, I think, than just having a sprite particle. Okay, so that's it. So in order to make this work, really all we need is just attach it to the player. So let's find the player, make this object a child of the player game object. And again, let's also make sure to set all of this to 0, so the position on 0, 0, and 0. And there you go, just with this, that's all we need. If we test, here we are stopped and there are no particles, and as I start moving, there you go, some nice particles around the player. Okay, great. Next, let's add a pretty obvious one, some kind of mini tutorial. We want a window to show the controls and the goal of the game, and wait for the player input before we start the countdown. So for that, let's go into our canvas, so let's show our canvas. And inside, let's create an empty game object, call it the tutorial UI. Let's drag this one above the game pause window so that it shows up behind it. Let's double click to center it, and let's press on the 2D button to go into 2D mode, okay. Let's also hide those two windows so we can actually see what we're doing. So let's hide all of these, okay, great. Now this one, first of all, let's stretch it to occupy everything, so put 0 on everything, okay. Then inside, let's make a UI image for our background. Once again, let's stretch it, put it like this. And for this one, instead of black like we've used for all of our windows, let's actually leave it on white. Put it on an alpha of something like half, so something like this, just to be a bit different. Then on top of this, let's make another image, so let's make another UI image. And for this one, instead of stretching, let's give it a size, so let's put it on 1280 by 800. And for the image, I created a nice image for the tutorial. If we go inside the assets and then inside textures, yep, here is a really nice tutorial image. So let's just go ahead and use it. So on the image, let's drag it. All right, there's our nice tutorial image. So this has a pretty basic tutorial. So the recipes come in from the customers, then the player has to prepare the correct recipes and deliver them on a plate on the delivery counter. So just a very basic tutorial. And also over here, it's very important for the player to know how to actually play the game. So there's some labels for the controls, and now we're going to dynamically add some keys on top. So let's do that. Let's create an empty game object. Call this the key. Let's put it on a size of 40 by 40. Okay. Now let's go inside, and inside let's make an image. Let's name this the background. And for the sprite, let's go with the included circle, so default circle. And for the size, let's stretch it to occupy everything, put it on 0, 0, 0. Okay, there's our nice key. So we have the background, and for the background, let's actually make it just a little bit darker. And let's also add just a nice shadow. So maybe 3 minus 3. And let's also make a nice outline. Let's put it on 2 by 2. Full alpha, so something like this, just to be a nice one, maybe 1 by 1. Okay, so that's just the visual. And then on top of it, let's add a text. And this one is essentially going to be the key. So let's put a key. For the width and height, let's stretch it to match the parent size, okay? Then for the font here, let's go with maybe just a 20. Let's put it centered down the middle. And also let's put it on bold. Okay, so that's our nice key indicator. So this is our key. And we're going to have the movement. So the movement on the keyboard is going to have 4 keys. So let's just duplicate. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 keys, okay? Then on the gamepad, that one is actually not rebindable, so let's put this one as static. So let's just go inside the text, and just say left stick. And let's lower the font size so that it fits in there. Okay, great. Then for some more keys, we're going to have the interact action, then the interact alternate, and finally the pause action. Then let's just duplicate these to be on the other side. Okay, so these are all of our keys. Now, instead of having key 1, 2, 3, this is very difficult to understand, so let's give it some proper names. So this is the key move up, then we have the key move down, then the key move left, then the key move right, then this one is going to be the key gamepad move, then we have the key interact, the key interact alternate, the key pause. This one is the key gamepad interact alternate. This one is the key gamepad interact, and finally the key gamepad pause. Okay, all of these, and since we're going to drag references to the text objects, let's also give those a name. So just copy, drop it with text, just like this. Okay, so those are all the names, so everything is nice and organized. Okay, great. Now let's make the script to run this. So our tutorial UI, let's go down into our UI scripts, create a brand new C# script for the tutorial UI, and let's attach the script. Okay. So first, let's drag references to all of our keys. We only need the text, so let's do a serialized field of type text mesh pro UGUI. Again, never make the mistake, always use the UGUI one if we're working in the UI. So the key move up text. So let's add all of these. Okay, these are all the references. Then over here, let's drag on and make sure to drag the correct ones. Okay, let's double check to make sure all the references are correct. Okay, they all seem correct. All right, great. And then over here, let's do pretty much exactly the same thing that we did over here on the options. So we need exactly this. So let's copy this. And over here, let's do just that. Let's do a private void update visual. And on this one, let's do pretty much this. So the key move up text. And on this one, you get binding text of move up. Yep, let's just do all the others. Okay, so those are all the bindings, that's great. Now let's go over here on a private void start. And on start, let's update our visual, all right. And also let's make sure this updates just in case the player rebinds something from the pause menu whilst the tutorial is still visible. So we just need to know when that happens. So let's go over here onto the game input and make a nice event. So public event, event handler. Let's call it on binding rebind. Okay, we have this event. And down here, when we have our rebind binding function, we do this, we rebind, and over here, let's invoke this event. Okay, just like this. So then on tutorial UI, let's go into the game input, the instance, on binding rebind. Let's listen to this event. And as always, let's rename this. So let's put it game input. Okay, when this happens, let's simply update the visual. Okay, that's it, pretty simple. So let's test and see if the inputs are correct. And if there it is, we do see it correct. So we've got was, we've got E to interact, F, and over there we've got the gamepad. Okay, great. So all the buttons are correct. All that's left is the show and hide. So over here, let's make the usual two functions. So private void show and a private void hide. And for these, game object set active. And this one is going to be into false. And this one is going to be true. Okay. So for show, up here on start, let's actually show it by default, even though it's actually already going to be shown, but still, okay. Then for the hide, this one we want to hide when we press the interact action. However, when that happens, we don't want just this window to hide. We want the Kitchen Game Manager to change the state. So over here on the Kitchen Game Manager, we currently have the waiting to start, and that one actually has a timer. So we count down a timer and then we start. Whereas right now we want it to be based on player input. So let's modify this to not be based on timer. So let's just get rid of this timer. And now let's see all these errors. So on waiting to start, we are not going to count down any timers. Instead, let's listen to the game input. So game input, let's listen to the on interact action event and rename this to the game input. Okay, so when we have this event, when the player presses the interact action, let's check if the state, if this one is on waiting to start. If so, then let's modify the state. So let's go into state and we're going to go into the countdown to start and let's trigger the on state change event. Okay, so that's it. So we're only going to change it on the player input and nothing over here on the update. Then for hiding the tutorial over here, one approach would be to listen to the interact action and hide it. But I think it makes more sense for this to only listen to the Kitchen Game Manager state. That way, if we wanted, we could also modify how this one changes the waiting to start. So let's listen to the state. Over here on tutorial UI, let's go into the Kitchen Game Manager, the instance, and let's listen when the state changes. So here we are going to check if the Kitchen Game Manager instance if it is on the countdown to start active. So if the countdown is active, then we're going to hide this. Okay, so that should do it. Now let's just do one more small thing. The delivery manager is currently spawning a recipe whilst we're still reading the tutorial. That's not quite right. So let's go over here on the delivery manager. And right now this one starts off at 0F and starts counting it down right away. Instead of always doing it like this, let's just make sure that we only spawn a recipe if the game is playing. So that's super simple. Over here, kitchen game manager instance, is game playing? If so, then we are going to spawn a recipe. And let's do the same thing on the plates counter. So let's go in the plates counter. So here we are on the plates counter, so we count down timer and spawn some plates, but let's also make sure we only spawn plates if the game is playing. Okay, so with all of this, let's test. And right away, here we are, we can see our nice tutorial teaching the player how to play. Okay, great, here we've got the controls, everything, and we're currently waiting for an interaction. We can see over there, plates are not being spawned, and recipes are also not being spawned, but as soon as I press the E key, and yep, there you go, the countdown starts playing, and we've got everything else, and yep, there you go, the game starts, and after a while, yep, we've got plates, and we've got recipes. Alright, awesome! So next, let's polish the countdown visual. Right now it's pretty basic, it's just a static number, so let's add a nice animation to it. Let's go inside the canvas, let's find the countdown UI, so the game start countdown, okay. So here it is, we just have some basic text. Now let's go into the main game object and let's add an animator component. Then let's create a brand new animator controller, so let's create a new, down here, an animator controller for the countdown UI. Over there, let's assign this controller. Okay, now let's open up the animation window. So window animation, open up the animation window. Okay, let's create an animation clip. And over here, let's name this the countdown UI number pop-up. Okay, that's great. Now for making the animation, we want to basically make it shake and also make it fade away. So one very useful component is the canvas group. So over here, whilst on the parent, let's attach a canvas group component. This one is a really useful component. In this case, the main benefit is it lets us easily animate the alpha. So let's go ahead, enter on recording. Let's go into the frame just before 1 second. So let's go into 60 frames because we are on 60 frames per second. Over here, let's record the normal keyframe. So let's modify the scale a tiny bit just to record it, and let's reset it back to 1, okay, just to record the keyframe. Then for rotation, let's rotate it on the Z, then put it on 0, again, just to record the keyframe, okay, great. So now we can go back into the first frame. And over here, let's first make it smaller. So for the size, let's put it on 0.6. Then let's rotate it to the left. So let's put 17 over here on the Z rotation. Okay, like that. Now let's move up by just 3 frames. So on frame 3. Over here, let's make it quite a lot bigger. So let's put it on 1.3. And let's rotate it to the opposite position. So minus 17. Okay, that's great. That's a nice start. Now let's put it on frame 10. And over here, let's set the rotation to 0. And for the scale, put it on 1.1. Okay, so now finally over here on frame 50, let's set the alpha onto 1, and then on 1 second, let's put the alpha on 0. Okay, so let's preview, and if there you go, a nice simple animation. Okay, so that was great. Now we just need to play this when the countdown happens. So let's stop recording. Let's go inside the animator controller. So here it is, we've got our number pop-up, and we basically just want to play this animation whenever we want. So let's put it and make a transition from the any state onto the number pop-up. On this transition, let's make sure we have no exit time. And for the settings over here for duration, let's put it on 0 so that it's instant. Okay, great. Now, obviously, we need a condition. So on the parameters, let's create a brand new trigger. Call this the number pop-up. Let's select that one and trigger it on this trigger. Okay, great. So now for handling this logic, here we have the usual question. So do we put this visual logic on the same UI script, or do we separate the animations from the UI? For me, I find that the UI is usually part of the visual, so sometimes I like to mix the two, and sometimes I keep them separate. It really depends on a case-by-case basis. This visual is so simple and so connected to the actual UI logic, so over here let's put them together. So let's open up the game start countdown script. And over here let's first grab the animator, so private animator for the animator. And on private void awake, let's just get the animator and just get the component of type animator. Okay, so we have the animator. Now we basically just need to keep track down here where we're modifying the text. We're doing this on every update, but now we need to know when this number changes. So let's basically just keep track of the current number and the previous number. So first of all, over here, an int for the countdown number. And we're going to get this. So this is our countdown number. And over here, we set it to string. Okay, and we just need to use a different function. So instead of cl, let's use cl2int just to convert the output into an integer. Okay, great. So we have the countdown number. Now we just need to know if this one is different from the previous one. So let's go up here. Let's define a private int for the previous countdown number. Then when we go down here, we've got the current countdown number, okay? Then just check if it's different. If it is different from the current countdown number. If so, then let's update it so the previous one becomes this one. And now let's fire off the animation. So let's go into the animator and set the trigger. And again, we don't want to use strings, so let's go up to the top of the file, make a private const string. Let's call this the number popup and number popup. Okay, so we have this, and down here we just set this trigger. Okay, so that's it, pretty simple. And just for fun, let's also add a nice sound effect. So let's go over here onto the sound manager and let's make a function to play sound. So just like we did over here for the play footsteps sound, let's make another one. For this one, let's call it play countdown sound. And for this one, let's not receive a volume or position. And we just play, let's say, just the warning sound. So just down on vector3.0 and with the current volume. Okay, so we have this function. And then down here, just go into sound manager instance and play the countdown sound. Again, we could refactor this code to separate the UI logic from the animation from the sound. That is one approach. And it's actually one thing that we're going to do in the next polish stage. But this one is also a possible thing, since the UI is always so directly connected to visuals. Okay, so with this, let's test. So here in the options, let's just make sure that we have our sound effects. So let's make sure they are playing. Okay, great. Now let's go ahead and play. And there you go, we have our nice countdown number. And there you go, it looks great. So it looks great and sounds great. Alright, awesome! As you can see, just by adding a simple animation and some simple sounds, it already looks so much better. Now, the next thing we want to polish is on the stove. So let's go into our stove, back into our counters, back into 3D and zoom in over here. Okay, let's also make sure that we hide the canvas just so we can play around this. Alright, great. So there's our stove. And for this, we want to add basically a warning icon and a nice sound when the meat is about to burn. So let's go inside the stove counter prefab, okay? So now inside of this, we already have a nice generic progress bar UI. And like I mentioned, if you want to get some more custom behavior, you can combine a generic bar like this one with some specific component. So that's exactly what we're going to do right now. So over here, let's create a brand new canvas. As usual, let's make it a world space canvas. For position, let's put all of this on 0. Let's just lift it up by a bit, so set it on a Y of 3. Okay, great. Then let's add our super useful look at camera component and make it camera forward. Okay. Now inside, let's go ahead, create a new image. Let's put it on a size of 0.5 by 0.5. Okay, just a nice square. And for the sprite, there's a nice warning image in the assets. So it's this one. Here we have the warning. Okay, great. Basically, we want to show this when the meat is about to burn. So let's make a script to run this. And on the canvas, let's give it a proper name. So let's call this the stove burn warning UI. Okay, so let's make the script to run this. So a new C# script with the exact same name. And over here, let's attach a script. Okay, great. So now the first thing that we need is obviously a reference to the stove. So let's make a serialized field private for the stove counter, Okay, here in the editor, let's drag the reference of the stove counter. Okay, great. So now we basically just need to know when the food is about to burn. And for that, we can actually listen to the onProgress event. So let's do a private void start, and on start, let's go into the stove counter, and let's listen into the onProgress change event. Okay, so we have this one. And basically, we're going to want to show this element. So let's define a bool show. We're going to want to show this when the progress normalized is above a certain amount. So let's define a float for the burn show progress amount, and let's say on 0.5. So on this one, we show it. Except obviously we don't want it to be shown when the food is just cooking. We only want it to show when it's about to burn. So that means we also need to check the state on the stove counter. So let's make a function to check if we are in the state that we want. So we're here on the stove counter. Let's go down to the bottom. And let's make a public bool is fried. And over here we just return if the state equals state.fried. Okay, that's great. So now here we're going to show if the progress is above 0.5 and the stove counter is on the fried state. Alright, so that's the logic that we want. Then we just want to show our hide, so let's make the usual functions. Private void show and a private void hide. And just do game object set active into either true or false. And over here, if show, then let's call the show function. And if not, let's call the hide function. And of course, on start, let's start off as hidden. Okay, that's it. Let's test. Just over here in the editor, make sure the reference is dragged, and let's save the prefab, go outside, and hit on play. And yep, right away, there's no element. Okay, great, now I place it. And yep, while it's cooking, there's no element. And now once it's on the halfway point for burning, and if there you go, we've got the nice warning. Okay, awesome. So now that this is working, let's just add a nice animation. So once again, let's go inside the stove counter, and on the burn warning UI, let's add an animated controller. Then let's actually create the animated controller. So let's create a brand new animated controller for the stove burn warning UI. Then let's assign it, okay. And over here on the animation window, let's create an animation. Let's put it on the same folder and call it, for this one, let's say flash. We're going to make it flash. And then again, for making it flash, let's use the same component that we used a while ago. So let's add a canvas group. So here it is. Now we can play around the alpha, so super useful. Although I should say that at this point, since we just have a single image, we could just record a change over here on the alpha for the image itself. However, one place where this component is super useful is if you have multiple images. So if over here I duplicate this one and I put it off to the side, if I change the alpha on one of them, then obviously it only affects that one. But if I go over here and I modify the canvas group, that changes the alpha for both of them. So if you have a group of images, then using the canvas group makes it super simple. So anyway, so here we have just our image. Let's go ahead and record, and let's say we start off on an alpha of 0, then after 10 frames go into alpha of 1, and after 20 frames back into an alpha of 0. Okay, so that's it, a super simple, very basic animation. We don't even need any logic since we just want this animation to play non-stop. So that's great, that should be working. Now let's add some sound. So for that we could make another script, but already on the stove counter we already have a nice sound component. So let's open up this script, the stove counter sound. So this is basically where we're playing or stopping the sizzling sound. So over here we can just add the warning sound. We're going to play the sound just like we have over here for the burning UI. So let's actually copy these same components, and over here let's paste it. So for this one, instead of show, let's give it a proper name, so play warning sound, except it's not on state change, so let's actually listen to the other one. So stove counter on progress changed, let's listen to that one, and it's on that one that we use this. Okay, so we've got that one. And then for playing the warning sound, we're going to want to basically play it every certain amount of time. So let's make over here a private void update. And on update, let's just define a private float for the warning sound timer. And so down here, we just count it down as usual, time.delta time. And if this one is under 0, if so, then let's reset it. So define a certain maximum. Let's say 10 times, or maybe just 5 times per second. That should be good. So we have this, but obviously we only want this to run if we should be playing the warning sound. So let's actually save this one up here. So private vol for these play the warning sound, and then we set it on this one. And down here, let's just go, and we're only going to run this if play the warning sound. Then we're going to run our timer logic. All right. And then over here, all we need is to play that warning sound. So let's actually go into the sound manager. And just like we added the countdown sound, let's add another one. So let's say the play warning sound, and for this one, let's receive a vector 3 for the position, and we're going to play the warning sound on this position. So now over here on the stove counter, let's go into the sound manager, the instance, and let's play the warning sound, and pass in the stove.transform.position. Okay, that should do it. So we now should have a nice warning sound, and over here we should have a nice animation on the burn warning UI. So let's see both of those. Okay, so let's pick up some meat and drop it. And right now it's cooking. Okay, great. And once it gets to the halfway point, if there you go, now we have a nice warning sound. All right, awesome. Let's just add one more tiny thing. Let's make the bar itself also flash red when we're about to burn. So once again, let's go inside the stove counter. And on the progress bar UI, let's add a nice animator. And let's go ahead and make one. So let's create a new animated controller. For the stove burn flashing bar, let's go ahead and assign it. So it's the one on the progress bar. Let's add the stove burn flashing bar. Then on this one, let's create new animation. Let's go inside the assets, animations. Let's make one and just call it idle. For this one, we're going to want the exact same color as the normal color. So let's go into the bar and set the color. Just save a keyframe over there. Okay, so that's what we want. Now let's make another animation. So let's stop recording and let's actually duplicate this one. So duplicate it. And for this one, name it Flash. Now, of course, we need to add it to the animator controller. So let's go over here and drag it on top. Okay. Now for the animation, let's select the Flash. And for this one, let's go ahead, click on record. Let's start off on this one. And after a few frames, so let's say maybe after 10 frames, let's flash in red. And after 20 frames, let's copy paste the same frame. Okay, so that's our nice flashing bar. Now let's just set it up. So let's go into the animator. And over here, we're going to have a transition from that to flash and from flash back. Now all we need, of course, is an animator to control this. So let's make a new animator parameter. Let's make it a boolean and call it is flashing. And again, make sure to be careful with case sensitive. Okay, so from idle into flash, let's go ahead, remove the exit time. For duration, make it instant, so 0. And for the conditions, when that one is true, okay, great. And for going back, once again, same thing, so instant. And let's make the condition when it's false. Okay, that's it, super simple. Now let's make a script to run this. So let's go ahead, create a brand new C# script for the stove burn flashing bar UI. Let's go ahead and add it to the bar. So that's the flashing bar UI, okay. Over here, let's do pretty much the same thing that we did on the other one. So let's go over here onto the stove burn warning UI. Let's actually copy exactly this. So let's go on this one and paste this one. Then back here in the editor, let's drag the reference to the stove counter. And over here, the logic is going to be very, very similar. So the only difference is we have an animator. So the animator, and we're going to grab it on private void awake, animator get component of type animator. So we have the animator, then let's define the parameter. So private const string for the is flashing, and let's set it is flashing. Okay, we have our parameter. And now down here, instead of showing and hiding, let's just go into the animator in order to set a bool. And the bool will be the is flashing, and let's set it based on show. So either we show or hide, and we actually don't need these functions. And by default, of course, let's leave it on false. Okay, so that's it, super simple. Let's test. Just make sure to save the prefab and hit on play. Okay, let's go ahead and cook, so let's pick it up and drop it. All right, so it's cooking. Let's wait for it to be burning. And as soon as it gets there, yep, there you go. We've got a nice warning, a nice flashing bar, and a nice sound effect. So all 3 warnings making our stove much more polished. All right, awesome. Now just for balancing, let's play around the timers. So let's go into our scriptable objects on the frying recipe SO. Let's make this one take 5 seconds. Then on the burning recipe, for this one, let's make it take 6. And finally, let's also add another stove. So let's take our stove counter, duplicate the prefab, let's put it over here. So rotate it to the side, let's get rid of this one, and put this one right in there. So on 7.5, 0, and -1. Alright, so we now have 2 stoves. I can put one cooking, put another one, and I can start cutting down some cheese. Start cutting, and before they start to burn, let's actually here. There you go, that one is about to burn, so let's pick it up quickly. And that one is actually going to burn, but I got it. Okay, great. Alright, awesome. Everything's working great. Now for one more polish element, let's make a nice visual when we deliver either a correct or incorrect recipe. I think it would look good as a world canvas on top of the delivery counter, so let's do that. Let's over here find delivery counter, let's go inside the prefab. And now in here, let's create a new UI canvas. Let's name this the delivery result UI. And as usual, let's make this a world space canvas, so put it on world space. And for the position, let's actually lift it up, and then we're going to make it look at the camera. But just like this, it might actually go inside the wall, so let's put it over here to the side a little bit. So let's put it on this position, so on the X of -1.6, on a Y of 3, and on a Z of 1.2. Okay, that's the position, so right there. That is going to be looking at the camera. Now inside, let's create a new UI image. It's going to be our background. And for the size, the width and height, let's put it on 2.2 by 0.9. Okay, that's our background. For the color, let's tint it in a nice green. So let's put it something like this. Then let's also add a nice outline. Let's put it on full alpha. And for the size, let's put it on 0.1.1. Then let's also add a nice shadow component. For this one, leave it on half alpha. And let's put it on 0.2 and -0.2. Okay, so that's a nice visual. Now on top of it, let's create a new UI text. Let's call it the message text. And for the message, we're going to say something like delivery and then underneath success. Let's put it on a width and height of 0. Let's put it on a super tiny font. So let's say just 0.25. Let's put it in bold and put it down center and get rid of wrapping. Okay, that's it. Let's just push it a little bit on the left side, so on minus 0.32 on the X. Okay, and now next to it, let's make another UI image. For this one, call it the icon image. Let's put it with a size of 0.5 by 0.5 and put it over to the right side, so on an X of 0.7. Okay, and now for the sprites, included in the assets are two nice sprites, so there's a nice cross for when we get it wrong, and there's a nice tick. Okay, so that's the setup that we want. Now on the delivery result UI, let's go ahead and our look at camera component. And for this one, let's go different. So instead of the camera forward, let's go ahead with the look at inverted. So there it is. This is our setup. Now let's make the script to run this. So let's go ahead, create a new UI, new C# script for the delivery result UI. Let's attach the script and open. Okay, so now here let's make serialized fields for our elements. So a serialized field, first of all, for the background image, and this is actually going to be of type image inside Unity Engine.ui. Okay, our background image. Then we're going to have another one for the icon image, and we're going to have another one. This one is a Text Mesh Pro GUI for the message text. Okay, let's save. Okay, so let's drag the references to the background, the message text, and the icon image. Okay, great. Now over here, let's listen when a delivery is delivered. So let's make a private void start. Let's go into the delivery manager, the instance, and we have all of our nice events. So we've got a success and a failed. So let's listen into both of them. So both the success and on the recipe failed. Let's listen to all of these. And as always, let's write good clean code and rename this. So delivery manager on recipe success. And for this one is the on recipe failed. Okay, we have both of our events. So over here, it's actually going to be very simple. We just want to play around the text, the icon, and the background color. So for example, when we fail, let's go and we want to set the background image to about a red. So for defining the color, let's actually go up here and define a color for the success color. And we're going to have another one for the failed color. And then for the sprites, let's also have that. So a sprite for the success sprite. And another one for the failed sprite. Okay, those are all the elements. So over here in the editor, let's just set them. So for the success color, let's actually use the exact same color. By the way, here's a quick tip. If you go up to a field, for example, like this one on the color, you can right click and copy and then go into delivery results. And over here, right click and paste. There you go, the perfect color. Then for the failed color, let's go with a red, maybe a bit darker. And also importantly, make sure you set the alpha to full. Okay, so we have a red nice like that. Okay. Then the success sprite, this one is going to be the tick, and for the fail, this one's going to be the cross. Okay, those are all of our elements. So now over here, when we fail, let's go into the background image and set the color, and let's put the failed color. Then for the icon image, let's set the sprite to the failed sprite. And for the message text, let's set this one for delivery, and then failed. By the way, this /n, this means a new line. So over here, let's just set the text on this one. So it essentially means that it will write delivery, then new line, and then failed underneath. Just make sure you're using the / and not the /. So use the backwards one. There you go. There's a new line. Okay, so that's the on recipe failed. And now on the recipe success, let's use the success color, the success sprite, and over here, delivery success. Okay, so that's great. That should be working. Now just one more visual thing. Let's add a nice animation. So just like we did previously, let's go over here. Let's add an animated component. Let's create an animation for this one, for delivery result UI. So let's go up here, create a brand new animated controller for this. And let's go ahead and assign it. So delivery result UI. All right, now let's make an animation. So this delivery result UI, let's call it just pop-up. And for this one, let's do just like we did for the numbers. So let's scale and rotate it. However, if we rotate, that's actually not going to work. That is because we have the unlock at camera, and this one is already going to be setting the rotation. So we would end up with this script fighting the animator for the rotation. So that would mess things up. However, one nice and simple solution to this. Basically, we just put this inside another game object. So let's create a new game object, and let's put it inside. Let's an empty game object for delivery result UI, and then look at camera. So we have this one. Now the reason why I created it inside is that so over here we can set everything to 0. And now with that one all on 0, we can go ahead and drag this outside of this object. And there you go, that one keeps the exact same settings. And now on this one, we can add the unlock at camera component and set it up just like we had. So the unlock at inverted. And now on this one, we're going to make a child of that one. And there you go, now everything is on 0, exactly as it should be. And on this one, we can get rid of the look at camera, and now we can indeed play around the rotation. So for the animation, let's just go ahead and set it. So for this one, let's go up to 1 second, and let's record a keyframe on a scale of 1, and on a rotation of 0. Then let's go back into the beginning, and for this one, let's scale it backwards, so maybe something like this, maybe a 15. Let's put it quite a bit smaller. Then let's go up by 3 frames. Let's put that one on -15, so rotation on the other side, and put it quite a bit bigger. And then on frame 10, put it on, say, 1.1, with a rotation of 0, just like that. So there you go, there's a nice pop-up. And for the alpha, let's also go over here into the 50, and let's just add the canvas group. Let's set this one over here is on 1, and then we scroll it down to 0. Okay, so that's our nice animation. Let's stop recording. Let's open up the animator controller, and over here, let's make our nice animations transition. So transition from any state into that one. Let's make it based on a trigger. Let's call it just pop-up. And for this one, this says no exit time, duration of 0. And let's go when the condition when we have this trigger. Okay, so that's it. Although one thing, by default, this animation is going to loop. So let's just go ahead, we can select the animation. And over here, let's just untick loop time. So that way the animation will not loop. Okay, so that's great. Now let's go into the script. And over here, let's get our animator. So private animator, animator, private void awake. Let's get the animator, just get component of type animator. And let's define over here the private const string for the pop-up. So we have this, and then when we have either fail or success, let's just go into the animator, and let's set the trigger for our pop-up, both up here and over here. Now we just have obviously one issue, which is that it starts off as visible. We don't want that. So over here, we can just do game object, set active into false in order to hide it. And when we get either of these, let's set it both to true. Then afterwards, the animation will make it invisible. So it will still be active, but it won't be invisible. So that's fine. So just with this, everything should be working as we want. So let's test. Let's just make sure to save it and go back. Okay, so here we are. Let's try delivering an incorrect plate. And there you go, got a delivery failed. Okay, great. Now let's try delivering a correct one. So someone wants a cheeseburger. So let's cook it, slice some cheese. Let's get some bread. So bread, cheese, and pick up the burger and deliver. And there you go, a nice delivery success. All right, awesome. Okay, so with these handful of changes, you can already see how we made quite a big difference in our game. We didn't do anything to change any core mechanics. We just made what was already there pop out. We added a nice visual boundary to make the map look nice. We added some nice particles when the character is moving. Then we added a nice tutorial and controls right as the game starts. We also added a bunch of effects on the stove, so it flashes, has a warning and some sound. And lastly, we also added a nice pop-up when delivery is delivered, whether correctly or incorrectly. Now of course, we can always keep polishing the game until infinity. There's always more small things you can add to polish the game just a little bit more. But at this point, I'm very happy with what the game looks like. So after all this work, let's go into the next lecture where we're going to play our game from start to finish and see what we've done.